He felt weak. The keen edge of the Stormlord's power blade had cut him, carving a deep gouge in his shoulder. It had been agonizing to begin with, but the pain was fading, leaving behind it a cloying numbness. The loss of sensation was much worse. Agony at least brought with it clarity. Helbrecht could barely feel his fingers, his grip on the hilt of his sword slipping. Helbrecht would have suffered any amount of pain gladly. He was blessed with the blood of Dorn. He was a marshal of the Black Templars, the holiest of the Emperor's sons. He had won 1,000 duels or more, bested champions and hordes alike. And now he was losing to this creature, this ancient dead thing that had outthought, outstrategized, and now outfought him. This faithless, hateful alien. His vision tunneled and he coughed up blood. It spattered onto his tabard, staining the black cross of his chapter. His chapter, his blood. They were all his blood, and he had led them here to die.
No!
Helbrecht flung the word at the Stormlord as if it too were a weapon. He struck out at the Necron with a heavy blow from his sword that made the blade ring in his hand and his wounded shoulder ache. It snapped cabling and rent the metal of the Stormlord's body. He had wounded it. He could wound it. Helbrecht followed up with another strike at the Stormlord's weakened armor. The Necron creature stepped aside deftly and Helbrecht stumbled. Blood drops scattered onto the ice from the wound in his shoulder. The Marshal turned to face his foe. The damage he'd done to the Stormlord's body was repairing itself. Tiny metallic insects were crawling over the surface of the Stormlord's metal exoskeleton, knitting it back together. For the second time, Helbrecht had the peculiar feeling that the Stormlord would have been smiling if it were capable.
You grow weak,
the Stormlord said.
Weak and tired. You and your kin will fail here, as humanity's empire will fail, because I will it.
Helbrecht snarled.
You are arrogant,
he said through blood-flecked teeth.
A relic of a dead empire that has no right to exist.
The Stormlord cocked its head.
That is quite amusing, coming from one such as you.
Helbrecht darted forward, looking to plant his sword in the Stormlord's throat. Not even attempting to parry, the Stormlord pointed its staff at Helbrecht with a swing of its arm. Conjured bolts of lightning struck Helbrecht in the chest, stiffening his limbs and making him blind, deaf, and mute all in an instant. The power field surrounding Helbrecht's sword shorted out with a burst of light. He stayed on his feet by virtue of stubbornness alone. Helbrecht's sword connected. The force of the blow split the blade from point to hilt. The Stormlord cried out. Helbrecht tried to laugh, but found he couldn't even breathe. The lightning blast had sent his primary heart into arrest.
You are a stubborn creature.
The Stormlord's voice was a distant rumble, like the roll of a thunderhead. Helbrecht struggled to focus. He could hear a wan, wet thumping sound. It was drowning everything else out. He realized with unpleasant clarity that the noise was his secondary heart.
You have tried to claim this galaxy as your own for 10,000 years.
The Stormlord continued.
Yet you have little of account to show for your efforts. Such failure must be as depressing to bear as it is pathetic to behold.
You dismiss us,
Helbrecht managed.
But for every drop of Imperial blood you spill, for every inch of our ground that you spoil with your presence, we will hunt you.
He smiled through bloody teeth.
Until the stars themselves go dark, we will hunt you.
The Stormlord cocked his head to one side in an oddly human gesture.
I expect you will,
he said.
But here today you kneel before me defeated.
The Stormlord's eyes flashed.
And I will ensure you never forget it.
The Stormlord took hold of Helbrecht's right arm and severed his hand with a single stroke of his blade. Helbrecht bellowed in pain and anger. Blood jetted from the ruined stump of his arm, drawing patterns on the ice.
May this remind you,
the Stormlord said, watching Helbrecht with cold curiosity,
of your dishonor and defeat.
Helbrecht glared up at his enemy. Not like this. He would not die like this.
I will make you pay,
Helbrecht managed, blood frothing between his clenched teeth. He tried to get to his feet, but his limbs were sluggish and weak. He couldn't get up from his knees. The Stormlord laughed and closed his hand around Helbrecht's throat. The Marshal felt his feet leave the ice, the Stormlord suspending him in the air.
Learn from this,
the Stormlord said,
so that we may duel again.
Then he threw Helbrecht from the ice bridge and the Marshal fell, cursing into the fathomless dark. Before we begin, we have a quick word from today's sponsor. Do you like high quality, comfortable, affordable shirts with awesome designs on them? If you do, then check out INTOTHEAM. They have amazing graphic tees and multiple other types of high quality clothing. The designs don't come out in the wash or dryer, I tested this myself, and they are very comfortable and well fitting. Thank you to INTOTHEAM for sponsoring this video. Click the link in the description or pinned comment to check them out. They are having a massive sale right now, so for the next few days you can get a ton of high quality clothing for a low cost. Again, if you like great clothes that both feel and look amazing, go check them out. They make for good and unique everyday shirts, as well as something fun to wear to the gym. Now, let us learn of the greatest general in Warhammer. He is the one who made gods feel fear. He is the taker of 1 trillion hands and master of 300,000 worlds. He is the Stormlord. Imotekh is one of the greatest threats of the galaxy and is amongst the most powerful individuals to ever exist. He is Pharaoh of the Imotekh dynasty and wields a might capable of shattering empires. Long ago, even before the war in heaven, the Stormlord was feared and respected, yet only as a general, not a pharaoh. In the Silent King's Wars of Secession, he made a name for himself with his utter efficient brutality. He was held in the same regard as generals such as Xandrak, for Imotekh was swiftly recognized as a genius. Gone like the Kuvu became a Necron idiom for cleaning one's plate of food. The Kuvu of course were a secessionist dynasty that dared go against the crown. The Silent King willed them to be destroyed, and his royal Heka would not be denied, for the Stormlord swiftly did as he was ordered. The entire dynasty, every last living being, every trace of their very existence, was destroyed. Thus began Imotekh's legacy and reign of terror. Enemy dynasties were squashed beneath his boots as insects, and it became very clear that no opponents could defeat him. As biotransference consumed them, Imotekh emerged as one of the most dangerous beings that would ever grace the physical realm. He led vast and terrible armies against the hated foe of the Old Ones, and such was his power that the ancient enemy feared him. Imotekh is but a man, the Old Ones are gods. For a man to strike fear into the hearts of gods is perhaps the greatest showing of dominance the universe has ever seen. Not even Primarchs or Phoenix Lords have such an achievement amongst their history. Such is the power of Imotekh. The war in heaven came to a close, and then the great sleep fell upon the Necron people. 60 million years passed as the universe moved on, the never-ending flow of time surging forwards. The galaxy changed, empires rose and fell, species were brought forth and extinguished, all while the Necrons slept. Finally, the rightful rulers of the galaxy rose, yet Imotekh was not first among them. Upon Mandragora, the crowned world of the Imotekh dynasty, the people stirred. Nobles slowly came to consciousness and rose from their tombs, but the Pharaoh had not awoken. Throughout the galaxy, many Necrons would not rise from the Great Sleep, as 60 million years can cause problems and erosion to even the most advanced technology. Entire tomb worlds were lost to violent acts of nature, yet the Pharaoh of the Imotekh dynasty was one of the only to perish during Mandragora's sleep. This left those first nobles to stir from slumber a massive power vacuum. The Necron tier were always prone to squabble and civil war, and this has not changed since becoming the Necrons. The royalty swiftly raised their legions and went to war with each other, each believing to be a rightful ruler of the dynasty. To keep from other competitors and even more collateral damage, revivification protocols were suspended for the time, meaning no other nobles would wake to join the war. One particular noble thought back to Zarek's Great War and remembered the great general who still slept upon the crown world. Imotekh would be gracious to the one who took him out of the sleep, and surely he would aid this noble in seizing his rightful power over Mandragora. Imotekh, of course, is no one's pawn, and he is as well versed in the political realm as any noble. As a result, upon waking, he amassed his own army and destroyed the one who had woken him. This sparked the beginning of a swift yet brutal takeover, as the Stormlord easily quashed every other opponent on the planet. Claiming the dynasty as his own, the weight and power of Pharaoh rested on his shoulders. His Heka saw to it that his people would be united, and his will was carried out. Through the system, he obliterated all who stood before him, destroying any who opposed his power. So wrathful and terrible was his might that after only a few campaigns, the majority of nobles bent the knee without issue, as they knew they stood no chance against the Stormlord. In mere centuries, he had taken 80 worlds for the dynasty, and was not stopping anytime soon. The other races of the galaxy, of course, eventually encountered the Stormlord, and found nothing but horrid defeat when facing him. Imotekh's strategic capabilities are near impossible to put into words. His mind is that of a supercomputer from a level of technology unknown to the galaxy. He can predict every single move of every single general, all while leading a charge on a fortified position and deploying doom scythes on an entirely different planet. Along with his mind, he wields a grand panoply of war. Within one hand, he wields the Staff of the Destroyer. This is a sacred relic of the dynasty, an heirloom that has been held by the pharaohs of Imotekh history. It holds incredible power, both physically and symbolically. As Imotekh points forth his staff, horrid green lightning pours from it and engulfs anything it touches. This was enough to stop Helbrecht's heart and leave him without senses for a time, knocking him unconscious and rendering him unable to move afterwards. In the other hand, the pharaoh bears a gauntlet of fire, a massive curling hand that dances with green flame. These flames lick the fingers and can be commanded forwards to drown an enemy in fire. Of course, as most important figures within Necron society do, Imotekh contains a phase shifter, allowing any mortal blows to simply pass through thin air as the Stormlord leaves the reality. If a blow is to land, though, and somehow pierce the sempiternal weave around his body, Imotech's phylactery full of nanoscarabs will swiftly go to work, almost immediately repairing any damage done. Altogether, Imotekh is almost as powerful in one-on-one combat as he is an ingenious commander, his war gear making him nigh untouchable to all but the greatest warriors. While he may not be considered a grand duelist, one should consider how easily he defeated Helbrecht, one of the greatest living swordsmen in the current Imperium. There is but one being that frustrates the Stormlord's efforts, that of the Ork. The Ork is such an unpredictable, seemingly random and stupid being that even Imotekh struggles to understand their ways. The greenskins often defy all logic, not using any plan of any kind, and oftentimes this can be true. As a result, acting randomly and without thought is ironically the greatest way to have even a sliver of a chance against the Stormlord. Of course, this only works for a short amount of time, and any Orc incursion will soon be crushed after a few moments of frustration. His title is not a mere name, for alongside Imotekh comes a dark and terrible storm. This storm howls with haunting wind and roars with thunder. Green lightning splits the earth and a horrible gloom overcomes the land. All caught within this unnatural force will be overcome with dread and terror, and most will not survive the lightning. Those unfortunate few who do live, however, will do so infected with blood-swarm nanoscarabs that wriggle within their flesh. These malefic canoptics then emit a signal that brings about a far worse fate than lightning, for out of reality the flayed ones materialize. From the ghost wind, these insatiable hunters stalk to cleanse wet flesh from their screaming prey. These storms alone are enough to make lesser enemies fall to their knees or flee in terror, yet more formidable foes may yet hold their ground. This, of course, is vanity. When facing Imotekh, all is vanity. There is no hope, no chance of success. It is truly pointless. There have only been 2 recorded conflicts that saw what even comes close to a defeat for Imotekh. One was against Logan Grimnar, in which his space wolves breached the Stormlord's phalanx in search of tracing the Infinite, but any other details have appeared to be lost. The other was aboard the Inevitable Conqueror, Imotech's Cairn-class tomb ship. High Marshal Helbrecht had sworn an oath of vengeance against Imotekh for events in which we spoke of earlier. This oath was almost fulfilled when he and his Templars detected the Stormlord's forces around the Imotekh dynasty's core world of Devadas. Expeditiously, the Marshal rushed his ship to intercept his hated foe and boarded the Necron's flagship. Imotekh, conceding that he had been caught in a poor situation, simply teleported to his escort ships and left before Helbrecht even saw him. This would cost him the Cairn-class ship, as the Black Templars flew it into the nearby sun, but it would bring unbelievable rage to the High Marshal. This was his single chance to fell Imotekh, the Necron who brought him embarrassment and dishonor, and he had squandered it. In one sense, this was a victory to Imotekh, despite the lost battle. Aside from these 2 conflicts, there have been no recorded instances of Imotekh ever losing a battle, let alone a war. However, there is one thing that holds the Pharaoh in check, at least at times. This would be pride and sentimentality, emotions one would assume entirely gone in a being of such extreme logic. Yet, all Necron lords awoke with one form of eccentricity or another. The Stormlord adores gloating over a defeated foe, watching them break in mind, body, and soul. He loves watching the hope die in a foe who, only seconds ago, thought they had found victory. The realization of defeat is like a strong drink to Imotekh, and it is easily his greatest weakness, intoxicating him with his moment of victory. Along with this pride comes a sentimentality for his foes. The Stormlord collects trophies from particularly special enemies. These tokens he takes while also often sparing their lives. The foe is often left with some form of distinguishing scar, a wound to their pride and psyche, and almost always a missing hand. These are all so that they will remember the commander who bested them as a general and as a duelist. Imotekh ensures that his victories will not go forgotten, and he relishes the chance to relive them again as his petulant, fuming enemies come back to settle the score. Of course, all of these beings are simply vermin, parasites of the galaxy who crawl over an empire that is not their own. Regardless, they make for good sport and bring the odd moment of joy to the Stormlord's cold, black, non-existent heart. Of course, this is said to be his greatest weakness, yet it has not necessarily brought him the loss of a battle. It has only ensured his foes live to see another day, which of course may, and on one occasion has, caused problems in the future. In fact, his pride is the only reason High Marshal Helbrecht is still alive, as was discussed in the earlier reading. Upon Schrodinger 7, not only Helbrecht was defeated, but the Black Templars chapter as well. From the moment they made planetfalls to the moment they vacated the Ice World, the Crusaders of Dorne were outmaneuvered, outsmarted, and outgunned at every turn. They took horrendous losses in the conflict, and were lucky to even leave with their banner. Helbrecht lost multiple members of his honor guard, and of course, his hand. Keep in mind, Helbrecht is commonly viewed as one of the galaxy's greatest generals. He's easily one of the Imperium's greatest, and Imotekh swatted he and his forces aside as if they were playthings. Thus is the power of the Stormlord. One more showing of Imotekh's acumen may be displayed in way of the Siege of Somar. Upon the tomb world Somar, the Stormlord made planetfall. Here, he would begin negotiations with the world's overlord, demanding him to bend the knee and join the ever-growing Sautek dynasty. The noble would swiftly accept this demand as the ancient enemy of the Eldari appeared in orbit. These Eldar hailed from the craft world Imotekh, perhaps the most hated amongst the Necrons. For Imotekh has been purging the galaxy of slumbering Necrons from the day of its creation. Throughout the stars, they have searched for tomb worlds and destroyed them. Such dishonorable purging will be answered for someday, and on this day, a tiny sliver of such would be repaid to the craft world. Eldorath Starbane, Farseer of Imotekh, found himself sorely mistaken as he led his forces on what was thought to be a barely awake tomb world. Seeking to cut down the newly risen foe and slaughter the defenseless slumberers within, the overconfident Eldar rushed into battle as he reached the tomb's entrance, not waiting for the rest of his host. This, of course, was his first of many mistakes. Imotekh devastated these measly forces in a series of maneuvers that only one of extreme guile could achieve. Over and over again, the warriors of Starbane were tricked, baited, and slaughtered. Despite this, the Eldar were many, and the forces available to the Stormlord were few in comparison. So, as his armies dwindled, Imotekh retreated into the tomb, knowing his foolish and arrogant foe would follow. Of this, he was correct. Eldorath cast his runes too swiftly, acting the moment he saw victory in the strands of fate. The Azaryani wandered deep into the tomb until they reached its heart. Here, Imotekh sprung his trap, sealing the Eldar in with quantum graphitic force fields. Imotekh gave Starbane a salute, then released the Scarabs. The room exploded with the buzzing things as they swarmed every inch of air. They clawed and gnashed at the Eldar, slaying many of them, but they soon disappeared. Those who survived this initial attack would have been better off dead, for after this the flayed ones appeared. Blood and gore swiftly painted every surface as the ghouls began their work. Eldar were torn to shreds and flayed alive in moments, yet the warriors began to grow organized and warded the foul beings off after forming into tight circles. This, of course, was all according to plan, and Imotekh dropped the force fields. In seconds, the Eldar were cut down by Gauss fire as the Immortals advanced. The battle was over in moments, and only one Eldar still lived, that of Starbane. As the Stormlord strode in, observing his victory with pride, he severed the Farseer's hand and spoke.
Let me tell you of my future. My hand will reach out into the stars, reshaping the galaxy into a place of order and unity. Under my reign, the kingdoms of old shall live again, reborn to an age of power and glory, the like of which you can only imagine. I will rule every planet touched by the light of this star, and even in the darkness beyond, my name will be whispered with fear and respect. Your future, by contrast, is looking less than glorious. You will not be reaching out your hand to anything ever again, I think. Embrace the pain and humiliation of his loss, so that you might better learn the lessons from your defeat. Learn them well enough, and you might even be reborn as an enemy worthy of my attention. A hand is a measly price for such a gift, is it not?
These are but a few examples of Imotech's countless victories within the 41st millennium, and these are child's play compared to those won in the War in Heaven. So too has Imotekh seen success against the Imperial Guard, Flesh Terrors, Iron Hands, Tyranids, and many more. He is still a being shrouded in mystery, and one can only hope that we may unearth more about the great general in the times to come. As he gains power, it only becomes more and more impossible to stop him, and who knows what will happen once he reaches the doorstep of the Imperium. Only time will tell. The Pharaon may face a foe of his own kind as the Silent King draws near. Tensions are high within the political realm of the Necrons, and who is to say if the ruler of the Imotekh dynasty will willingly bend the knee to Caesaric, as he once did. Imotekh is indeed one of the most intelligent beings in the galaxy, and so he would likely see the pointlessness in such a large-scale civil war. Along with this, Imotekh has seen the weakness that infighting brings, crushing all within his dynasty the moment he rose from the Great Sleep. The Silent King brings hope of the unification of the dynasties, and with this, Necron dominance over the galaxy. If his character is to be maintained, he will likely seek a way to peacefully work beside the Silent King, if he is unwilling to work under him. Aside from Caesaric, there are none within the dynasties who may rival his power. The only commander who may possess the same genius and ability that Imotekh does is that of Nemesaur Xandrek. Thankfully for the Stormlord though, Xandrek is loyal to a fault. His Nemesaur is by far the most honorable and trustworthy Necron in the entire Empire, and never in 60 million years would the thought of regicide ever cross the wily old commander's mind. He is content with fulfilling the Pharaon's will alongside his friend and bodyguard Vargard Oberon. And so, the Stormlord's reign of terror continues across the galaxy. As it stands, he is one of the greatest threats the flesh of the stars has to fear. They are all nothing but bacteria. Filthy, worthless, pathetic bacteria. The stars will not be infested with them much longer, for he wills it.